The Masked Journalists, Chapter 1. The puppets of power journalism was once the beacon of truth, the voice of the people. But in a world where power writes the headlines, truth becomes an illusion. This is the story of three journalists, each playing their part, each hiding behind the mask of credibility. Arman was the golden boy of journalism, charismatic, confident, and trusted by millions. Every evening he sat before the camera, delivering news that shaped the nation's thoughts. But behind his polished words was a different truth. He was not a journalist, he was a puppet. His scripts were not written by facts, but by the powerful hands that controlled the government. In secret meetings, he received files filled with exclusive stories, carefully crafted to destroy the opposition. His job was not to inform the public, but to guide them, to make them believe that one party was their only salvation. And they believed. Night after night they tuned in, nodding along to his passionate speeches, unaware that he was merely an actor on a stage built by politicians. Then there was Hamza, the rebel, the firebrand who stood against the establishment, claiming to be the voice of the people. He did not report, he raged. Every government move was a conspiracy, every project a lie. But his rebellion was not about truth, it was about chaos. He thrived on anger, on division. And behind his words were hidden hands, feeding him stories, fueling his war against the system. He watched the protests he ignited from his office window, a smirk on his lips. To the people, he was a fearless journalist. But in reality, he was another piece on the chessboard, pushed forward by those who needed unrest to stay relevant. Mehak, on the other hand, played a different role. She was the storyteller of progress, the journalist of hope. In her world, the government was always right. Every project was revolutionary, every policy a blessing. If a bridge was built, she called it history. If a hospital was neglected, she simply never spoke of it. She did not lie. She chose which truth to tell. And so, the people saw only what she wanted them to see, a world where one party could do no wrong, and the opposition could do no right. Chapter 2. The Fall of the Masks. But power is never permanent, governments change, and when the tides turned, so did the fate of these journalists. Arman, once the voice of authority, found himself silenced. The same screens that once displayed his words now called him a fraud. His carefully built world collapsed. His allies abandoned him, and as arrest warrants loomed, he packed his bags, slipping through airport security under a false identity. As the plane took off, he knew he would never return. Hamza, too, faced his reckoning. The people who once chanted his name began to question him. Was he truly a warrior for justice, or had he simply played a role in a larger game? His sponsors withdrew, his audience shrank, and his words lost their fire. He sat alone in his studio, staring at his hands, realizing that without the chaos, he was nothing. Mehak, the last of them, sat before her blank teleprompter, waiting for a script that would never come. Her praise was no longer needed, her carefully curated stories no longer relevant. For the first time, she had nothing to say. The fall of these journalists was not just a collapse of their careers, it was a collapse of trust in the media. What was once considered truth had now been exposed as manipulation. But the people, tired of being lied to, began to question everything they had once believed. Chapter 3. The Rise of True Journalism. Where the voices of Arman, Hamza, and Mehak faded, a new voice emerged. Aisha, a young journalist, fearless in her pursuit of the truth. She was not a puppet, nor a rebel for the sake of rebellion. She was a journalist for the people. She asked the questions that needed to be asked, exposed the stories that needed to be told. Aisha stood before the camera, not as a tool for political agendas, but as a voice for those who had been silenced. She confronted politicians, questioned decisions, and showed the public that true journalism was not about allegiance or popularity. It was about accountability. With every report she broadcasted, the people began to trust the news again. They knew she wasn't crafting an illusion for them. She was revealing the reality, no matter how uncomfortable. The truth had a way of breaking through, no matter how deeply it was buried. And as the dust settled from the fall of the masked journalists, the rise of Aisha marked the beginning of a new era, one where journalism was not about serving the powerful, but serving the people.
Subscribe to my channel.